Good morning, everyone. Welcome to American Scouser's Morning Coffee with American Scouser, or tea, of course. I have the coffee, and my buddy Trevor is here now. Let's bring him on and see what he's got. Trevor, what's happening, man?
Not too much.
I would
Good
give
game
shit to
day today.
Trevor for being late, but it's mostly on me since I sent the invites only like a few minutes before. So, yeah, just catching up this morning, getting ready with the headlines and everything like that, which, you look at the headlines this morning, Trevor, and it's a lot of police work, police
Yeah.
and legal work. So we'll start with Klopp. We'll start with the Liverpool related stuff and kind of like work our way back. What do you make of the deployments of lawyers and stuff like that based on Klopp's comments, which I think he has every right to go after, but what do you make of it?
I think it's something that's his prerogative to go about it how he wants to. Me personally, I think it's a bit overboard. It's
I can see
just,
that.
it's one of those things where you're going, okay, this could be something that's diffused kind of quickly, but he wants to go that route with those methods. Do it. Go. It's not going to hurt. I think the organization as a whole, and if it helps him get some peace of mind, then by all means.
Yeah, I'm kind of like torn on that myself, actually. Good morning, guys. It's 52 in Houston, and he's freaking cold. Don't freaking get me started. I think I'm kind of like torn on this whole club thing. I mean, part of me does say, dude, why even like bother? But part of me says the part that is so freaking annoyed with this media that, you know what? Yeah, fucking go after him. Because in some ways, when you kind of let something like this linger and not go after it as strong as he's going after it, I can see it being worse. In 6 months, they bring up another thing and they reference this. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't a legit thing in the first place or some bullshit, because that's the kind of stuff media does. And honestly, if I can't imagine what the mindset of players, managers, anybody who has to deal with media on a regular basis, because obviously they get the brunt of it. I, as a objective observer, if you will, get freaking annoyed and aggravated. And this is not just British media, the same sports media over here, ESPN, whatever you call
Oh,
it. Build them up, tear them down, and that's all they do. So they built up Klopp for years, and I almost feel like it's not a secret that Liverpool is not as well liked in most cases and mostly rooted against over there. So it's more like while they're looking like they're slightly down, let's keep kicking it. We built them up, let's tear them down. And I think that's the part of me that says, you know what? Yeah, fight it. Go after their asses.
yeah, and yeah, I agree with you to the sense of it's something that you don't want to kind of have in the space as a potential quote unquote precedent, even though it's really not one. It's just that callback to something that you don't want to really just have to talk about over and over and over again. So if you kind of just kill it dead at the start, you don't have to deal with that. And especially when there's going to just be a month of the World Cup being in a place that has a lot of the same qualities that are trying to be attributed to him for that entire country. It would be a big talking point, I think.
Yeah.
And if you just, I'm starting to come back around to it not being as big of a deal, because initially and it's just a knee jerk reaction. Whenever you see something like, oh God, going after the media with like libel claims and just have a team of lawyers just going, oh God, it's a lot. You got games going on thick and fast up until the World Cup starts. It's not something where you need to like shift your focus. But now the more I just look at it and try to just piece it together in my brain, maybe it is you just cut the head off the snake before it gets worse.
And so, dude, how do you think it affects a team? Like, in some ways, it's a talking point that takes away from are you playing two in midfield, three in midfield, Gomez, trans defending, blah, blah, blah. So now this becomes more of the topic, and the questions that asked, is, you know, like, is Nunes passing, blah, blah, blah. Instead of these maybe being brought up all the time, it's going to be these issues brought up all the time. Is it a distraction, or is it more like a good cover for the players where they don't, they don't have to worry about all that shit? They're like, yeah, Klopp, right? And then they can focus on their game. Or is it a distraction at the end of the day?
I think it's a distraction, and because it's something where you have, and especially in England now, it's not just an English game anymore. It's a international collection of players that are coming in, and if they can, even if they don't necessarily believe it, they always have to sit there with it back in their head of their manager is being brought into this light, and he's going to come in and maybe he's going to be hard on them, and like, oh well, maybe it's something that just doesn't need to be there. And I think if it's something that can be kind of taken off the table and they can just kind of hash it out as a team and go through it and then get back to football, I think it's going to be better for everybody, top down.
Yeah, I think so. That's why I'm like, you know what, just go for it and get after these guys more than anything else. So let's continue with like police stuff here. And by the way, you can access all this on our websites, on the LFC news page. It's all these streams constantly updating, so you can kind of like get the latest at all times. So
all your favorite feeds.
Sadly, these are the latest. When you look at like the BBC headlines, it's all police-related stuff. Police investigate the damage to City's team coach, because obviously you can see the cracked windshield there. It could be Pep, I guess, banging his head on the glass too, but obviously it's more likely that some idiots threw some stuff on there. What do you make of that? Of course, if they investigated their chance and nothing came out of that. FA's obviously, I mean, we kind of knew the Klopp thing. We already talked about that they were going to, go after it and talk about that. Actually, when I first heard that, Klopp's getting lawyers and stuff, I was like, wait, what? For like going against the ref? Like he's trying to because he said he would agree to
assault charges
that comes that way. And yeah, I was like, what are they accusing him of, for God's sakes, that he had to get lawyers? But then I realized it was like two separate incidents. What do you make of this one? We kind of like talked about it a little bit on Monday. It's just a couple of idiots basically making it worse for everybody else in this scenario. I know previously it was more than a couple of idiots, but due to that one crack, it almost seems like one or two idiots this time.
Yeah, and the thing that I don't particularly enjoy about these types of things with the chants, which are always, and every team does them to Liverpool because every fan base has dirtbags in it. We've got dirtbags in our ranks that will say just heinous shit. Everybody has dirtbags in the ranks, and those things are going to happen everywhere you go to every team in England. It is inescapable. It's terrible. But the thing is, it's been allowed to go for so long, and these people that do it constantly aren't dealt with. So it's just going to keep happening. So, and the whataboutism was like, well, they didn't do that, so we got to take matters into our own hands and go after their players. And you're like, no, that's dumb. Why don't you just come up with songs that make fun of Man City players, but don't take in disasters or sexual assault cases? Keep it just, I don't know, rhyme his name with something funny. And just go with that and get super hammered and have a fun time doing your rhyme schemes. It'd be great. And you know what? You wouldn't go to prison for it. This particular instance and the one that you were referencing before, the one where they really just were like throwing full beer bottles at the bus and stuff as they were coming in. I think this is different, at least from what I've seen initially.
Yeah.
It was a couple of bozos trying to just hurl whatever they had within 5 feet of them at it, and one hit flush and caused a crack. And from what I've read, I didn't see any players getting hit. I didn't see any staff getting hit. It was just the bus, and a couple of them hit in just the right spots to do some damage. to the actual vehicle. Doesn't condone. I don't condone it, but I think it's something a lot less serious than they're trying to make it, because it was, oh well, they threw coins at Pep, and that was in response to the chants that were too. And I feel like a first grade teacher at this point. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Four wrongs does not come down to 2. It's just dumb, and it's probably a bunch of drunk people doing drunk people things, and they should be handled accordingly for it. There's probably security footage of it. Find the idiots, ban them from the stadium for as long as you deem it necessary. They hit the bus, so probably a year is good. You don't need to kick them out of Anfield for life. The guys who threw the coins at Pep, maybe they get the fuck out of here for a little longer. But that's where I'm at on that.
It reminds me of, I don't know if you're a Seinfeld fan, but like the chance of like Hillsborough, like any disaster when people work it into it reminds me of that like episode where like Costanza can't come up with the comeback episode where, just tell him you slept with his wife. Like, it's like when they don't have anything, it's almost like the fans know, like that's like the ultimate, the last resort, below the belt thing they can do to get under the skin and aggravates, and rightfully so, like Liverpool fans. So just tell him you slept with his wife, and that's basically what happens. That one comes out at the end when all else fails. They say they come with that. Alan says a simple job for Texan Auto Glass Repair Center. Now that we mentioned them on air, I want them as a sponsor on the show, and I'm putting Alan in charge of contacting them to get this all lined up for us. So it will be our first morning sponsor for the morning show. Will be a Texan Auto Glass Repair Center, where you can fix all your bus cracks.
Only bus cracks.
Only bus cracks. Specializing in bus cracks.
If you're driving a truck, or SUV, or car, no. Buses only. This is a very specific partnership.
Texan Auto, yes. If they pay more, then we'll push their other glass fixing things. But for now, we're only pushing their bus work. Yes. Mason Greenwood is granted bail over the attempted rape charge. At one point, this has been like a forgotten story because United fans have been running away from it as much as possible. I'll be honest, if it was one of our players, we would probably run away as fast as possible too, and abandon the dude, like as he should be freaking abandoned. What do you make of it overall? Why does you can't take the stupid out of the guy regardless of talents, or the asshole out of the guy in this case? This is not even like stupidity. This is just asshole.
Yeah. And if you go back to when all that stuff was coming out, of just all like the text messages and voicemails and the pictures, and initially I knew a couple like United fans in my neck of the woods that were just going like, you got to let it all play out. And then just like each day, I think
it was playing out.
In normal instances, it was like each day something would come out and you'd be like, all right, we just need to go through They were off the Greenwood bandwagon in about 3 days. It was the quickest just ghosting of a player I've ever seen in my life, and well deserved. And the fact that it's taken them this long to kind of go through this whole process, it's the justice system. They'll do what they do at a snail's pace. But yeah, I think he should just kind of go away. I can't
he is rapidly too. That's the thing. I understand that, and I think I remember, what was that, like 2 years ago? Something about Keita came out, and when it first comes out, I think part of us, especially the current squad, I think more than anything else, I think in the past, if something came out on Balotelli, I'd be like, I don't know. Let's hope this is not true. But
if there was something seedy on Robbie Fowler, you'd be like, okay, wait.
Yeah, is something really? There's truth to this, But like initially, you don't want to believe it, so I can see why you would say, okay, let's let it play out. Especially young kid like this. If they came out after like Rashford and stuff like that, I think I probably would say the same thing. Like, let's see what else comes out. Because sadly, we do live in a day and age where these guys do get taken advantage of, or false claims just to get something out of it, whether it's fame or money or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
But like that Keita situation, for example, nothing else concrete came out of it in terms of proof. It was just like an allegation and it went away. And I think in some ways, yeah, you don't want to jump on it. What kills me is people who were coming to his defense as shit was coming out. And it's like, bro, it's one thing to kind of stay on the sidelines and say, you know what, let's wait till everything comes out. But another to prematurely try to back the guy up. Like, dude, if you want to be hands off and say, well, let's wait, I'm not going to crucify him right away. Okay, that's fair. Like, let's wait till all the facts come out. But there's a difference between that and like blindly coming, like supporting a dude. And now those are the people that don't even mention that they were kind of supporting him at the end. They're like, oh, they're really going after Greenwood because he's, this, that, and stuff like that. And that's the part I think that was more aggravating to me than anything else. I mean, the media is going to take anything at, so much for fact checking. We don't do that with the internet's alive in the way it is. It has to go
That's
out
a
there
lot
the
of
first
work.
one. Yeah, that is a lot of work. So the fact checking has gone out the window. So it's just a matter of who gets it out there first, true or not. So you don't want to run with it. But as old, like you're saying, like the text, the fucking recordings came out. It's like, okay, time to admit kind of a deal. Neil Lennon is sacked from Ammonia. Yeah, they lost to United, but I think what I was seeing was like they lost 4 out of 7 or something like that, and it's not a league one. It's not as competitive of a league, and I know in that neck of the woods, being from that neck of the woods in Turkey, the managers are very, very disposable, like very disposable, because people want, especially in big clubs, this whole let's give him some time thing never ever happens, especially in big clubs. I think smaller clubs, they're like, oh, just make us survive, man, because back home, just like in England and stuff too, and I guess over here too, like everybody's an expert, so there's no time given to develop anything. And the challenge over there, and I'm sure he had it as well, and I know like Turkish league, Italian league actually has this problem too, where because of the fan pressure, so many new signings are done, and then you bring in a manager. Well, he needs freaking time because you got all these new people, and then well, you don't give him time. The other guy comes in, he wants to bring his guys, so it's like rinse and repeat for a lot of clubs till they can try to establish something. But yeah, I guess he had like 4 out of 7 and stuff like that. So here's a couple of other headlines from Alan over here. Alan's gone quiet now. I think he's calling Texan out of glass on behalf of us, so which is all good. World Cup host Qatar receive more human rights than Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, despite both being worse. As he defends working for state-owned beIN Sports. Yeah, I've got no. My boss is bad, but not that freaking bad. Actually, these guys are worse and stuff. I mean, this
it's Gary Neville.
It is Gary Neville at the end. I think because he came out with pretty strong words against the World Cup, and I'm sure they were like, "You know who you work for, right?" And they were like, well, that's different, though. They're signing paychecks. So it's not as bad. This is the same exact. This hypocrisy is why we have a goddamn World Cup in Qatar in the middle of freaking winter, because money kind of sadly covers all of this bullshit. I mean, the stuff that happens in Saudi Arabia, and I actually lived there for a year. And like when I was like much younger. So, recently. But,
like last week.
Yeah, last week. I mean, the stuff that happens there, what's considered norm and stuff like that is just, unreal. But you know what? It's all washed out. I mean, they pretty much bought a team in the Premier League. So let's not kid each other. Dude, one day sent a plane full of chainsaws to Istanbul to chop up a guy. Next day, he sent a plane full of cash to buy Newcastle. So this is how the shit's unfortunately rolls. Speaking of teams, by the way, who made a ton of signings and trying to put it together. I don't know if you got a chance to look at the games yesterday. 2 games on deck. I gave the PSA for the fantasy teams. So I figured, right, Brighton will probably get a bunch of goals against Nottingham Forest. So let me go pick up a couple of Brighton guys, use my free hits because I have a bunch of guys from like Arsenal and City. And not so much. I think they did everything but score that game against Forest. And Forest hung
I
out.
took Henderson out of my team.
And I should partially take blame for that. So what do you make of that? I mean, basically, if you watch the game, you would think, oh man, like it's a draw. But I mean, there were so many incidents where they were like, how the hell did they not score?
Yeah. Gross probably had the most egregious one of it, where he just kind of had like a open net and then just kind of had like a couple opportunities to do it and just fluffed his lines both times. And you're like, okay, this is just going to be one of those games.
Almost had like too much time.
Yeah. Well, like, yeah, you're playing a game and you're playing against a guy with lag. And then you realize that you have an open net, and then all of a sudden the ping catches up and they're at midfield with the ball and you have no idea what happened. It seemed like it was one of those things. And Henderson made a couple really big saves, stood on his head. Like I said, had his best game of the season without question. And he needed to, because Brighton gave them all they could handle, and he really had to just.
They were throwing the stat that Alan is sending us now: 59 shots and not scoring from it. That's almost rough. I mean, and it wasn't even like, they were getting. Henderson had a great game, and I think that has been really a great move for them, because I remember the first, like, their home opener. I don't know if they were first week or week 2. Where they won 1-0. He saved the penalty. I think West Ham maybe, where, again, like he single-handedly kept the 3 points over there. I think they only won 1-0 or something like that. And that's, there you go. They only had like 5 freaking points anyway. So, he's been a huge part of that. Kind of like he's had to stand on his head to be able to get him those points. But yeah, it was just shocking that, speaking of like a lag or a gaming reference, it was one of those games like it happens on FIFA where they're like, EA just doesn't want you to score. So you're like, there's nothing you can do. It's like, hits the post, it's that. You're like, you know what? It's just not going to happen this game. But Brighton could not rage quit, so they had to suffer till the end. The extra 5 minutes, even 95 minutes of. Yeah, it has to be frustrating, though. I'm sure it is for the manager, too. But it goes back to, I think we were just talking about this in the Premier League show, about their game against, I think it was Brentford, right? They tied Brentford last week away, if I remember this right. We were talking about, for them to be at like a top 6 team, they really have to be able to get 3 points from those. It was Fulham, sorry. No, not Fulham. What? I think it was Brentford. Yes, it was Brentford. Where they lost to Brentford 2-0.
Yes.
And it was like, one of those we were talking about that, for them to be that top 6 kind of a team, because they were headed that way, obviously, before Potter left. But they have to get points from games like this. You can't just play big against the big boys. I feel like Newcastle is on the same thing, but Newcastle has more of an upside, and I think they do overall better against like mid-table, lower table teams. This should be at home a guaranteed 3 points. Nothing is guaranteed, obviously, in Premier League, but still, if you want to be a top 6, if you want to, especially like the Forest game, it is probably the closest you can be. Second game was a lot more entertaining than the first one. The first one was more like, what the hell is going on? Is anybody going to score? But Palace comes back. I thought when Wolves scored, it was more like, holy shit, they scored. First of all, that was the first initial reaction. And then the second one is like, holy cow, they can pull something out of this, because it looked like Palace would struggle. But, Palace really deserved that one, and it could have been a lot more than 2.
Yeah, and going to the holy shit moment of the game, you're like, oh my God, Wolves scored. Oh my God, it was Adama Traore. Oh my God, he scored with a header. It was just like a bunch of just things that you don't see every day over and over again. And you're like, oh, okay. This was just the football gods making things right, because out of the thing that should have never happened, Palace was able to come back and pull it out 2-1. And you just
And yeah, I guess if you're a Wolves fan, when that happens, you're like, "We're fucking winning today." Like, it's just like when Traore scores with a header. I'm assuming that. But honestly, I don't know if you got to watch it, but watching this game, we talk a lot about Zaha, and we talk about what he brings and how he affects that team. Is he good for that Palace team? Is he almost like too dominant or too much of a target for that team? But watching him yesterday, man, that guy worked his ass off the ball as well. And that goal he scored, the moments he got the ball there, we're talking about like Gross, for example, missing what he missed. The moments Zaha got the ball there, I was like, well, that's a goal. And, you had no doubt. And like he finished it. What do you make of him? Alan Wallen says like Lennon for Wolves, maybe. I know like they were throwing a bunch of names for Wolves. And I'm assuming when Traore scored with the header, the interim manager was like, maybe I get to stick around. And then, no, never mind. But what do you make of like Zaha, like overall as a player?
I think he's a guy that is too good for that level. Granted, when he had his chance at United, he didn't really do anything, but he was also much younger, and he was, I think, he was United. He was one of those, he was one of those guys that would just run himself ragged. Now I think he's a bit more measured with how he can just be everywhere at once. And now he has a guy in Eze that kind of is like what he was when he was younger, to kind of just run around like a crazy person, and then Zaha picks up the scraps. I don't think he's a guy that has lost the work rate by any means, but he's just a smarter player now. And if I was a team that was trying to just get to the next level and needed a player like him, I would 100% go for him. I don't know if Palace will even think about selling him at this stage, because he's just so important to what they do. You look at when he's injured, just that is one of the worst teams to watch on like a neutral.
Is
Saturday
that because when he is there, because he's so good, the focus is on him and everything is built kind of like to take advantage of the fact that he's that good? So the moment he's missing, they don't have a plan B. And isn't that more on the manager, that you're like, everybody on the field is looking for Zaha? He's like, he's fucking injured, just play. But it's more on the manager to come up with the plan B. And I thought that's what Vieira was on the way to doing, especially the way they started the season. But yeah, you're right. If you take Zaha from that team, I mean, they're Forest or Leicester City.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you'd think Vieira is a guy that would be able to kind of build up some of these midfield guys to make them more viable as kind of like fulcrum players, and getting that defense, which it's not great, but Gaeta is a good goalie. They have good center backs. They have guys that can kind of get the ball and get it forward. But once it gets to that midfield, it just kind of gets bogged down. And then you have to have Eze and Zaha come back and then have to make a 40-yard run. And you're just going, it'd be so much easier if you could kind of just make things a bit more streamlined for these guys, so they wouldn't be running 19 miles of friggin' game, and then they get hurt for 2 weeks, and then you're useless. And then they come back, and then they just do it again. Then they get hurt, and you're useless. And there's just, you can only hit your head against the wall so many times before you realize that the wall is winning.
And I think, this is the problem with loans to me, is yes, it's a much cheaper way of getting somebody very talented, but they had Connor when Gallagher was there.
Gallagher was that
guy that you're talking about. It was the bridge between that midfield and the guys up top. And so you're like, okay, we got something going over here. They're like, where are you going? He's like, I was just on loan. And then he just leaves. And now you're like, oh, shit, now we're going to be able to replace this. And it's not that easy to be able to replace that quality. So I realize why teams do these loans financial wise. It's a way to improve yourself and your quality without committing a ton of money. but it can kind of backfire like this when it's almost like works too well, because it almost looked like, okay, we got that established. Well, you really didn't, because he's not there. He's not yours, and he's gone. And I think they're really, really missing him, because the runs he would make into the box, and like I say, he was that bridge in midfield that fed those guys up top. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I still think, Palace has more than enough talent to stick around. It's interesting to see what will happen with Zaha, though, because it's just he's every offseason he's been talked about going somewhere. And like you're saying, he's had his time in a big club, if you will, but it was United, and we know how they waste wingers. They have done a lot of it over the years. People have gone there as, top wingers and just been like, just disappeared. So maybe, like, I don't know. I can't think of a team where he would get a shot at, though. That's the only problem, because he comes across as being selfish and wanting to be the man, and he is the man over there. I don't know if he would kind of like eat a slice of humble pie and, go to a team where he's like, okay, like do a Richarlison and take that role on a different team, as opposed to being the guy on the team that you're at, but struggling. So I don't know if he's going to make that jump. But speaking of jumping, 6 hours, nope, not even 5 hours from kickoff over here. Will you be joining us for the pre-match? You around?
Yes.
Awesome. I think Mecca is going to be running away from his job too and making the pre-match, and whoever else jumps on. So we'll be live over here. That's why I kind of like save the pre-match talk for that. We already speculated more than enough about the starting 11. We'll be live pretty much like 5 to 10 minutes after the lineup comes out, so we can make some wrong speculations and predictions and stuff like that before the game. Get those in real quick before the kickoff. So we'll see you guys then. And of course, don't forget, tomorrow morning again, we'll be back with, actually, we'll have Alex joining us as well tomorrow morning. So have a good day, everybody. See you guys in 4 hours-ish, something like that, as once the lineup comes up. Take care.